Okay, now let's talk about types of stress. There's three types of stress in general. There's positive stress, there's tolerable stress, and there's toxic stress. You might be able to kind of guess what those mean, but let's jump ahead to the next slide and we'll talk about how different kinds of stress impact our response and reaction. Okay, so let's think about Jenga. Okay, nothing like using a game as an example for stress. So if you haven't played Jenga, it's a game of blocks and you pull out pieces of the block and trying to make it not fall over. So this is a very, very basic example of how the stress response system works using a really simple example. So positive stress, it's stressful to pull the block out of the tower because you never know if it's going to fall. And that's stressful, but it's also reinforcing a lot of different things that are positive, like our confidence, our sense of purpose, that we can succeed. And so in that sense, and it's manageable. It's also manageable. It's not like, oh, if you pull that block out and the tower falls, that the world's going to end. It's not like that. It's positive experience. It activates us enough to have benefits from that level of stress. Because if we didn't have any stress at all, then we wouldn't be motivated to do anything. If we didn't have positive stress to want to go to work, well, you would never get out of bed and you wouldn't go to work or go to school or accomplish things that need to get done. That's really what positive stress does. It motivates us to be activated enough to get on with our lives and do things. Okay, let's jump over to tolerable stress. And in particular, this is very true and happens all the time with children. Tolerable stress can be mediated or buffered by the support of an adult relationship. But we can also buffer responses to tolerable stress for each other, for adults with each other. So tolerable stress is, oh my gosh, I pulled the block and the Jenga tower falls over. It's not what you want to happen, but it's manageable. We can get over it, especially everybody says, oh, ha, 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 that's so fun. And you're still a good person. We still love you, even though you knocked the tower over. Think about tolerable stress. Somebody loses a job, okay? That's a really stressful experience to lose your job. That's, or to have something happen on that level. Well, that can be tolerated as long as there are people around to support somebody through the process of losing their job. Tolerable stress is mediated by somebody else. Think about if this happens and you're a 3-year-old and you're just like, it can feel totally overwhelming to a child to be the one to have the blocks fall down, and they might kind of unravel a little bit. But as a parent or an adult with a relationship, you can say, oh yeah, that happens to everybody. It's okay. You can manage your big feelings about having the Jenga tower fall over, or having your toy get lost, or not getting to pick the food that you're going to eat right now for dinner. So tolerable stress are things that we don't like that happen, that kind of throw us out of whack, but they're manageable. Now, let's jump over to the third picture, and that's toxic stress. Toxic stress probably is unlikely to happen in a Jenga game, but let's set the scenario of what that would look like. Oh my gosh, the Jenga tower falls over. There's somebody in the group who just cannot handle it and ends up throwing Jenga blocks or punching people because it got out of control. And now all of a sudden, everybody who's playing Jenga is on high alert because, whoa, somebody got violent over Jenga. That's a toxic stress response. Somebody's seeing red or having a raging fit over not being able to deal with the circumstances. So they're having toxic stress. It's like you lose control of your emotions when something is perceived or really happening interferes with your homeostasis, your status of calm. All of a sudden, it's out of control. And you're like, whoa, I can't, I'm activated. My heart rate's up, my breathing is up, my body is dumping sugar because I don't know if I need to fight or flight or freeze or just try to lean into this person and fawn in order to be safe during this highly stressful event. So we have positive stress, easy, good, necessary for us to grow and change and get better at things. Tolerable stress, totally can deal with it, especially when we have adults who have supported our resiliency, because this is really an example of what resilience means. It's the ability to overcome adversity. It's the ability to deal with stress in a tolerable way. And then there's toxic stress, which is so oppressive that we have to just react to it. We don't have any conscious way of dealing with toxic stress until after the threat has passed. Okay, so we have these different kinds of stress. We have our stress response system. Well, our body is amazingly smart about also having a stress regulating system. If your stress response system is activated, then what does your body do to bring it back to homeostasis, to bring it back to calm, to regulate the stress system? Well, first, what we have in our brain are lots and lots of connections that we've made across our lifespan that help us to regulate our emotions. So those connections are use dependent. If we have to solve problems on a regular basis, guess what? We have good connectivity in our brain to solve problems, which is going to reduce our stress response because we can activate some of those problem solving skills. And there's a whole lot of other things that are in existence in our brain that are use dependent. So hopefully somebody has helped to build up those connections that help the person manage stress. All right, the brain wires where the brain fires. So that's a really popular saying. Everybody says it all over the place, but it's true. Things that happen that activate the brain wire in the brain. So if something happens over and over and over again, one thing, it becomes predictable, and then the brain is going to create a neural pathway in that area. So the expectation is that if dogs are scary, hurt people, bite people, bark at people, intimidate people, then every time that happens, it's going to reinforce the brain firing when a dog is scary to the brain wiring, oh yeah, dogs are scary. I need to log that information in my memory because that is going to help me regulate my fear around dogs, probably mostly by avoiding them. So this is how the brain regulates itself. Remember, predictability, consistency help us to have expectations in the environment. And that, in a lot of ways, helps us to regulate stress. Connections really the brain develops in a hierarchical manner to some degree. It's not only structural that the brain develops from the bottom to the top. That's kind of old thinking. However, there is a hierarchy to the brain being activated. We're less activated in our frontal cortex, our rational thinking part of our brain, than we are in our limbic system during stressful situations. And we're able to access our frontal cortex when we're older better than when we're younger, because those parts of the brain haven't really come online yet, because our emotional centers come online and are activated earlier in life. They're the beginning. And then it moves forward to our logical, rational thinking part of our brain. It's why it would be ridiculous to expect a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, even 4-year-old to logically think out how to plan something because they're little. Now, does that mean that 3 and 4-year-olds can't plan anything? Absolutely not. The babies and littles can really do a lot of motor planning. But that motor planning happens in a different part of the brain than actual intellectual planning. Oh, I should do this because it will cause this to happen. All right. Deprivation leads to underdevelopment. Okay, so in the stress regulating system, if there's deprivation in the child's brain or the adult brain has had deprivation, then there will be less development, there will be less connections, there will be less capacity for that brain to access the information needed to find calm in a stressful situation. Early life experiences have an important role in organizing the mature brain. So this is where, again, resiliency comes in. We have to be able to focus on early life experiences with children in order to support the growth and development of their mature brain that's able to mediate and respond appropriately during stressful situations and not overreact in positive or tolerable stressful situations or underreact in toxic or certain kinds of tolerable stressful situations. So we have a lot of power and empowering capacity to build resilience by focusing energy on early childhood and infancy and relationships. I love this picture. So what is healthy stress? Healthy stress builds resilience, right? So stress is the balance between the demand of a situation and the individual's capacity to respond or to handle it. And so if I'm standing in the front of my street in the road and a car is coming at me and I can't move and I try to stop the car with my hands, well, that's a really stressful situation. And I don't have the capacity to stop a moving car from running over me. That is absolutely unhealthy stress. That is too stressful and deadly, and it's not going to protect me in any way. However, if I have the ability to see a car coming down the street and I can get out of the road and wave them down to slow down, that's empowering. That's healthy stress. I don't really like it that people drive down my street really fast. However, it doesn't harm me because I have the capacity to do something about it. I have the capacity and the capability to respond to that problem. And that really seems like a super basic example, but in reality, it is a super basic example. And we are presented with these types of stressful events, healthy stressful events, all throughout in just one single day. They happen to us all the time. And we get a choice or we get an opportunity to respond to healthy, stressful situations all the time. If we can respond capably, then we know that it's a healthy stress. if we're able to have homework and get it done, if we're able to do a chore in the house and get it completed, if we're able to do our job at work and get it completed, those are all healthy, motivating, stress-inducing events. However, they're not overwhelming. And so that's good for us. Even stressful situations like just recording these videos can be stressful for me, but I also love it. It's my passion. I get to talk about things that motivate me. It's stressful, but it's manageable and it makes me happy. So I get to live in the love section of this heart. If somebody were holding me hostage and said, you have to make these videos about stress, and I'm going to tell you every single word you have to say, and if you don't say it perfectly, then I'm going to hurt you. Well, I might be living on the other side of this heart. I wouldn't be loving it as much. It wouldn't be my passion. I'd be doing it in a toxic, stressful, emotional state. And so that's what's important to recognize, is the ability to manage stress is what helps us to build resilience. Now, because resilience is built and wired in early on in life, if there's too much toxic stress at the front end of life in infancy and early childhood, it can be very, very difficult for adults who've had that environment, if they don't have a loving, attuned, attached caregiver, to be able to see ways to manage healthy, stressful situations. There's a demand, but their capacity to respond to just a regular everyday stressor is compromised, and it just becomes completely overwhelming. And we've all met those people. They can't deal with and just average, regular, run-of-the-mill, oh my gosh, my garbage can got stolen and I don't know how to replace it. So instead of replacing it, I just do nothing. And now I have nowhere to put my garbage. And now that's going to build up into a much, much bigger problem than it would have if somebody has resilience, can say, oh my gosh, my garbage can got stolen. That's terrible. But I can get on the phone and call and let somebody know and have them deliver a new garbage can. And then we just keep going on with life. So that's an example of having the capacity to deal with the demand of a stressful situation in a competent way that leads to resilience or reveals a person's resilience. Oh my goodness, one of my favorite parts of this presentation, the Stroop test. Maybe you've done it before, maybe you haven't. Let me explain it to you. The brain is an organizing system. Its job is to take in information and help you to use it in a way that's functional and helpful to keep you alive. So in order to do that, the brain has to have rules. The brain has to have a way of prioritizing what it takes in, where it puts it, where it accesses it, and gives it back to the world. So what I want you to do now very quickly is grab your cell phone, grab a timer, get your watch out, whatever it is that you use to keep time. And I want you to get ready because I'm going to show you a list of words. And I'm going to ask you to read through the list of words. I want you to read the word as fast as you can on the list and then time it. And I want you to write down your time for reading the word. The words are all different colors, so just read the word as fast as you can. All right, ready? Set. Here comes the next slide. Read the words, purple, yellow, red. Okay, stop. I think everybody should probably have their number now. Okay, now you've taken that, you've written reading words, how many seconds it took you. Now we're going to do this test again. And I don't want you to read the word. No word reading. If you read the word, go back and correct it by saying the color of the word. All I want you to do is say the color of the word. Do not read the word. You're just announcing the color of the word. Get your phone out, time it, and ready, set, go. Red, blue, green. Okay, stop. In the pain. Okay, so the Stroop test. The point of this test is to reveal that different parts of our brain do different things. They have different jobs in order for us to be able to control things in our lives. In order for us to get things done, we have to be able to access information quickly and easily. And we do that in a hierarchical way, meaning that things that are really important for us to use all the time, think about it, use it or lose it, we have to have fast access to. Well, most of us are adults. Most of us read a lot of the time throughout a day. We have to read signs, we have to read books, we have to read things on even the television if we're watching the TV. We have to get information from language in a lot of ways. So it's important for us to be able to do that quickly. Now, the reason that you could read the words more quickly for most of you is because reading is such a priority in our culture and in our lives. So if you were able to read the colors over the words, there might be a reason for that. So typically children who are taught colors, but they're too young to be readers or to be literate, can actually read the colors really fast, but they can't read the words because they're not readers yet. So they're prioritizing, their hierarchy is about color over word, because that's more important to their lives at that point in their lives. So it's very interesting how amazing the brain is in terms of breaking it down into jobs that it has to do, and how each one of our brains puts things in a hierarchical order in terms of remembering and being able to retrieve, because we need to, depending on what we do. Like, I don't know very much about engineering, so probably anything I've ever learned about engineering is locked way back in my brain, and it would take a little bit of work for me to actually retrieve a formula for engineering or the language of engineering or something like that. But as soon as you put trauma-informed care and resilience out on the table, I'm right there because I deal with it every single day. So I can grab information about that because guess what? It's the use it or lose it. I'm using it all the time. And so it's very accessible to me and my brain. That's not true for everybody. Most people don't work in the field of neurobiology or trauma or resilience every single day. And so they're like, yeah, I kind of heard of this Stroop test thing, or yeah, I kind of heard of stress response or stress regulating systems, but I don't really remember how it works. Well, that's normal, because what's easily accessible for every individual is the kinds of things that they work with on a regular, consistent, predictable basis, because that helps us guide our lives. That keeps us safe and keeps us alive. All right. I hope that was fun for you. Okay. Now we're going to jump to, I love, love, love this picture, the neurobiology of development. So the brain is designed to be molded by the environment. Remember, babies are born fairly immature, human babies, and they have to do a lot of developing, and it's certainly a lot of brain development outside the womb. And so one of the reasons that is one, physically, because women are not capable of walking upright, standing bipedal. That's an evolutionary deal. And carrying and delivering an infant that's more than about 10 pounds. So 10 pounds is sort of the average, and without having really serious risks. So the trade-off for that is that we have babies that are born fairly immature, needing still lots of care outside the womb, like they still do inside the womb, but they're also molded by the environment in which they're born. So the brain is able to build and wire and lay down the pathways for survival for that particular infant into the culture, the family, the community, and environment that the baby is born into with the people. So wiring in the brain neurobiologically develops in response to patterns of interpersonal communication between the baby and his or her caregivers. And so that's so beautiful. You know, here's this little baby, and well, she's not really a tiny baby, but she's a little, and she's watching her dad or uncle or brother or somebody in her family of love or blood to learn how to shave. And so they're having this very, I'd say, you know, personal experience of sharing this experience together. Oh, this is what people do to shave their face. Now she's little, you know, even little boys, little anyone's don't need to shave their faces. So, but she's doing this because it socially and emotionally connects her to this person. And he's doing this for the exact same reason. It feels good to be connected to a loving, attuned other person. And these are the kinds of social engagements that create that experience and fuel more of our resilient feelings, the ability to overcome adversity, because we're being taught by loving, supportive adults that, oh yeah, we can do things, and they're here to support us and take care of us through them. So that's just one example of, you know, learning something from an adult, but adults are so important in the lives of young children. All right, remember, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences or trauma. Trauma changes the brain, fundamentally makes the brain operate differently than it would without trauma. Resilience, the ability to overcome adversity, saves the brain. What does that mean? It means that if you have a loving, attuned caregiver who helps you to overcome adversity in infancy, early childhood, through the loving relationship, through a loving relationship and connection, and it stays consistent and predictable, then trauma is mediated more effectively and doesn't have as significant an imprint on somebody's life. When there is no loving, attuned adult to support an immature brain through the process of trauma, the consequences on the brain are much higher. Okay, let's talk about the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, really quickly. Abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, physical neglect, emotional neglect. Emotional neglect is, I don't see you. You basically don't exist. You're so not worth seeing that I don't even acknowledge your presence in the universe. Emotional abuse is, I throw rocks, but they're really words at you. You're worthless, you're ugly, you don't even deserve to be on the planet. All right, those are things that happen to our bodies that impact our health and our physical and our mental health and our living out of a full lifespan. There's another set of traumas or adverse childhood experiences called household challenges that can happen. And that is the incarceration of somebody in the family, a mental illness suffered by somebody in the family. So when we look at the physical challenges, these are things that happen in the household. So maybe a person in the household becomes incarcerated. That's a parent, a grandparent, an uncle, a sibling, somebody's incarcerated. That's a household challenge that impacts children and is a trauma. Domestic violence, violence between watching somebody that you love be violently treated is traumatic. Substance misuse, when somebody misuses substances, then in the household, that affects other people in the household, particularly young children and infants. If a child loses through death, divorce, or abandonment or separation, a parent or a loving caregiver, that too is a powerful, powerful trauma that can have lasting consequences. Last but not least, it says physical, but it's supposed to say mental illness. And if somebody in the family suffers from mental illness, then that is also a trauma, and that will also impact a child if it's not mediated through a loving relationship. Okay, so these are the 10 adverse childhood experiences listed in the ACEs study. However, we also know that there are lots of things that can fall into the category of a trauma that wasn't necessarily listed. So, all right, the bonobos. I love to say that word. That's what these monkeys are called. And so one of the things that this particular study has taught us is about mirror neurons, which I'm going to talk about in the next couple slides. But what the bonobo study, why it's so interesting is because researchers tested how powerful the imitation urge is in children and in a group of bonobo monkeys. So, you know, when you see somebody do something and then you copy it, that's the imitation urge. It's like the wanting to copy somebody in order to see if you can do it because you admire them. It's a social thing to do. And so this is an interesting study. In one-on-one trials, what the researchers did was they sat next to children with a tiny box in their hands. And they also then sat next to bonobo monkeys. And inside the box with the children was a sticker. So they'd pull out a sticker and be like, here, you get a sticker if you can open the box. And with the bonobo monkeys, there was an apple in it because monkeys like apples. So here's how the research is set up. So the researchers are sitting with a box with a monkey or a child, and how does the child or the monkey get the treat in the box? So here's the box. Before opening the box, the researcher does some illogical action over the box. Maybe they pat it, maybe they swirl their hands around it. They do something around the top of the box. And these hand motions that they did over the box are totally unconnected to opening the box. You can see the box just opens like a regular box. However, after the child saw the researcher make the motion over the box, when they went to open the box, they did the same thing. It's like rubbing the genie, bottle or something. They did the same thing, and then they opened the box and got the sticker. But the bonobo monkeys never copied the hand motion over the box. Why? Why do you think the monkeys didn't do it and the children did do it? Well, I've already sort of given you a hint. So let's talk about why. What the bonobo monkeys did by not copying the meaningless gestures is really the most rational thing to do. Remember, rational, front of the brain. I don't need to do that dumb trick over the box. It's going to open anyway, and I'm going to eat the apple. So this is how Xana Clay explains what happened and why the monkeys didn't follow the same trajectory as the children. Yet the irrational thing that the kids did is part of the reasons why human cultures have evolved so rapidly and so diversely. Okay, what in the heck does that mean? These researchers think that because humans are social creatures, very social creatures, that one of the things that we do is we watch each other and then we imitate each other, because if that works for somebody, then it's probably going to work for me and I should do it too. So how often have you watched very young children copy their parents, lift weights or do downward dog and do some yoga or go running, and they can, pretend to run with their parents or talk on the phone or fiddle with a cell phone? All kinds of things that young children do in terms of imitation. Imitation is a very big part of our social connection, but also our learning. And so that's their conclusions are that this has to do with this imitation urge, this need to copy other people has to do with being able to socially connect. All right. And it also has to do with mirror neurons. Now, maybe you've heard of mirror neurons and maybe you haven't, but they are the most fascinating neurons in the brain, I think. And so what is a mirror neuron? A mirror neuron is like, if I were to scratch my nose like this, and you watch me scratch my nose, particularly not over a video, but in person, or rub my face like that, the likelihood of you doing the same action is very high, because my brain is telling your brain, hey, do that to your nose. Hey, do that to your face. Hey, scratch your eyebrow. Somebody yawns. How about that one? Mirror neurons. Everybody starts to yawn who witnessed the original yawner. This is a social connectiveness that happens among people because our brain is talking to other brains without really our permission or our vocal cords. Mirror neurons have only been found in macaques, humans, and songbirds. So what does that tell us? They're not in bonobos. So guess what? Bonobos aren't going to do this because they don't need to. They're like, okay, that's dumb. There's a latch on it. I'm just going to open it up and get my apple. But mirror neurons are involved in another person's actions and their intentions. So think about it. If you pat somebody on the back and then somebody else comes along and pats that person on the back, those are intentions. Mirror neurons activate our empathy center that says, oh, I'm feeling bad about that. Okay, I can empathize because my mirror neurons are responding to your mirror neurons and helping me to understand how it feels to be you, or how it feels sympathy to be somebody else. Mirror neurons exist in the prefrontal cortex, and their purpose is to help us to socially connect, to recognize what it feels like to be somebody else. So mirror neurons are very important to human evolution and human connection and survival, as well as resilience. So super fascinating. Don't worry, we're going to dig much deeper into mirror neurons as we move down these modules and classes. But here's your first dose of this really cool part of the brain. Next, we're going to talk about a case study. And the little boy's name is Gabriel Fernandez. I hope you did the pre-work around this story so you understand what we're talking about as we go through the details of how it unfolds in terms of resilience and trauma and adverse childhood experiences, because it really is, and even more importantly, the principles of trauma-informed care and making sure that we protect people from trauma. Okay, with that, let's jump forward.